Good morning, everyone. I'm Paige Bischoff. I look after ARM's Global Public Affairs. Today, we're going to kick off the Med building on some of the great insights that we heard yesterday about our sector. Specifically today, we're going to be shining a spotlight on the European Union and where it stands in terms of global competitiveness. Let's start with a couple of statistics just to give us a sense of where we are. The US is in a dominant position. It has more than 600 therapeutic developers, and that's a 33% increase from just 4 years ago. Also, nearly half of all industry-sponsored trials globally, that's about 1,200 of them, have sites in the US. And then there's the growth in Asia Pacific and especially in China. The number of developers in the region has more than doubled in the last 4 years, while the number in China alone has grown by a factor of 5x. In fact, China now has nearly the same number of developers as Europe. Add to that, the number of new trials started in China has been higher than those in Europe each year for the last 4 years. And China just approved its first 2 CAR-T therapies last year. When it comes to global investment in recent years, ATMP companies headquartered in the US have raised the vast majority, and the Asia-Pacific region is continuing to grow. Meanwhile, investment in the European headquartered companies has been largely stagnant. These numbers all serve to underscore that global competition is real, and the ATMP sector is heating up on a global level. We heard yesterday in both Janet's and EU Health Commissioner Kyriakidis' remarks that Europe started as a first mover in the ATMP sector, but now the region's ecosystem isn't exactly what it should be. The good news is that with a concentrated focus on the revision of the pharmaceutical legislation, which is coming at the end of 2022, along with other important policy files, the time is ripe to change Europe's current trajectory. So with this backdrop in mind, we have an excellent panel to tackle this topic today, and I'd like to invite them to the stage now. And we're going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the role that they play. Actually, Anna is with us remotely today. Let's start with Anna.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm really sorry that I won't be able to be with you there today, but I'm speaking to you from a very sunny Amsterdam. I hope the sun is not getting into the image of the video. So my name is Ana Hidalgo Simon. I work for EMA, for the European Medicines Agency, and I have been working with them for the last 20 years nearly. After some experience in pharmacovigilance, I'm returning a little bit home because after my medical degree, my Ph.D. was actually done with cells and transplantation. So I'm very happy to head now the Office for Advanced Therapies. And I'm involved in this process of change that we need to address in Europe, as we just heard from a very nice introduction. Thank you.
Susana.
Thank you very much. I am Susana Solis. I am a member of the European Parliament, and it's a pleasure to be here in my country. I come from Spain. And in the European Parliament, I work in different committees, very related to the healthcare sector. One is the Health and Environment Committee, the Industrial and Energy and Research Committee, and the Artificial Intelligence Committee, which is something that it is very related to the future of our healthcare sector. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation to give the overview of the European Parliament as co-legislators together with the European Commission.
And Christian.
Thank you. Christian Desaintes from the European Commission. I have a background in molecular biology and virology. I've been in the Commission for 20 years, in the Directorate General for Research and Innovation. I've been in charge of several dossiers like radiation biology, systems biology, stem cell research, emerging epidemics, and recently safety assessment of chemicals, but more recently ATMP and gene editing.
Thank you. So we also have one other guest today who is unable to make it, and that is André Riche, Director at Desaintes at the European Commission. We're grateful that he was able to record some of his thoughts for us. And in fact, why don't we open today by hearing from André and his thoughts on global competition and Europe.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. I'm so sorry that I cannot be with you in person, but let me address a few important points to you from European Commission, from the Desaintes, from my team. Advanced therapies hold extraordinary promise to address unmet medical needs and offer opportunity for highly personalized precision medicines. We know that ATMP products approved by the European Union came already on market in 2009. But however, we also aware that competition in this field around the globe is growing, especially from US and China.
And we'll hear more from André throughout the rest of the panel today. But Susanna, let me start with you. How are you thinking about this global competition issue? Clearly, you need to wait for the Commission to provide you with something as it comes to the pharmaceutical legislation revision. But there's a lot riding on that. So give us your thoughts on where you think Europe is currently and where it can go.
We have learned many things from the pandemic, but something which is clear is that we need more resilient healthcare systems and that we need to invest more in research and development and to ensure Europe is competitive, ensure our competitiveness. And it means for us also to reinforce our strategic autonomy, something that we always talk in the European institutions, which means not protectionism, but the ability for Europe to make their own decisions, its own decisions, and to choose which are their partners and with those who share our values. Having said that, we need a new pharmaceutical regulation. It is something that the one we have has been launched 20 years ago, and we need a pharmaceutical legislation that promotes an innovation ecosystem and that fits for purpose for the future. Now the European Parliament has already reported and approved a report about what we need for this pharmaceutical legislation. What is needed is an updated, a more flexible, more agile legislation in order to be able to reduce bureaucracy and to promote this innovation ecosystem in Europe. We will wait for the European Commission proposal at the end of this year, but we as co-legislators, we will make sure that we put the patient in the center of this legislation. And for example, these 30 million patients which suffer rare diseases with no answer, they can benefit for this legislation. And that we make sure that in the future Europe remains competitive and remains at the forefront of this sector.
Christian, did you want to add to that?
Not now.
Okay. Anna, I'm going to turn to you. There's a disconnect, right, between where the aspirations are, and we heard Commissioner Kyriakides yesterday talk about the aspirations for the ATMP sector, but sort of the current reality. How do you think we got to where we are, and what do you think we can do moving forward?
That's a very complicated question, so I start, and I hope my co-panelists to help me to fill the gap. It's obviously not one problem with one solution, and this is a highly complex and rapidly evolving field, so we will need to look at many things that need to happen together. So if I start from the ones who are working well, we do have a lot of things happening at the very basics. So the amount of basic research, the amount of public money going into universities, clinical, hospital research centers, cancer development centers, it's a lot happening in Europe. Now, the problem as we see it is that the translation of that into real medicines that arrive to the clinical is not translating well. We would like to see a lot more coming. The clinical trials are in the middle, and there are two big things happening there at the moment. The legislation that I'm very happy to hear from Susanna is looking into any way to improve that ecosystem, and we as a technical body are being consulted, and we are putting a lot of ideas on the table. And our ideas came from the experience of seeing where the stumbling blocks are along the line. So we are working together. I don't know what the legislation is going to say, but I know that we are putting every relevant concern on the table to the right people to see it with good examples of how things are being smooth or not smooth. And then we also have this new initiative of ACT-EU, this overall program change in management, addressing the clinical trials to increase the transparency, the harmonization, this idea of a single application. The fact of the matter is that we are not one country, we are one continent, and we have 27 different member states. They all have very good health systems that have evolved historically independently. So we are trying to put together things who are not coming from the same place. On the other hand, we have this universal healthcare. We have a lot of advantages of the system. Now we need to work into these areas that, particularly for the ATMPs, are being a difficulty. But there's enough movement in the system that gives me confidence that in a couple of years or in a little bit more time, we are going to be seeing a very different panorama in Europe.
Christian, when we think about where private developers and researchers can really help the Commission, any ideas as we think about these many challenges that you have where there's more drive toward harmonization at the EU level, and yet, as Anna just said, we have 27 member states with their own interests and agendas?
Maybe I would like to complement what Anna said on the previous question, because I would like to start maybe with a more positive assessment of the pharmaceutical strategy by saying that it has delivered, it has ensured safe and efficacious treatment to European patients. So I think that this is something which is to be taken into account. But the conditional marketing authorization has certainly posed some challenges for HTA and pricing and reimbursement bodies also, and because there is limited scientific evidence of the benefit of ATMP, and this is maybe a question that we can come back later about the data. And but also the other problem that I see in the legislation is all these innovative treatments have not been available in all member states because obviously it is dictated by different HTA and reimbursement bodies. And as Anna said, it's not, we have there is a fragmented ecosystem in Europe where it's a shared responsibility between the EU and the member states. So I think that the future legislation should really try to address these challenges and gaps, and should probably be flexible enough to adapt to technological development and the presence of digitalization, especially the real-world data, as part of the scientific evidence for the efficacy of treatment. Now, concerning your question, I think that first of all, I have two remarks, because first of all, I would like to say that the Commission is relatively open to anybody, including researchers and the private developers. So we are open to their voice. Usually when there is a revision of important legislation, the Commission usually has an open consultation where everybody can express its idea, its views. And, but certainly also from our perspective, from the research and funding, research and innovation part, we are well aware of the limitations, let's say the regulatory limitations concerning ATMP. And this is why we foresee in future calls for proposals calls that would address regulatory science and which would address the hurdles for the translation of ATMPs, because the Commission has funded a lot of, has invested in a lot of development of ATMP, but somehow there is a lack of translation. So certainly we're thinking of, in the future calls, of addressing these needs, where you know, also researchers should work together with the HTA and pricing and reimbursement bodies to try to solve the issue. Also maybe to train the academic developers and into the complex regulatory landscape of ATMPs. And I think that there is also one call which actually closes today, which is a call on the value-based pricing and reimbursement models. You know, we ask researchers to work in multidisciplinary teams to come with new models for pricing and reimbursement of advanced technologies, including ATMPs.
Clearly, no, that's critically important, and I think we'll delve into that a little bit more. One area I know that's also very important in terms of change in futuristic is on the blood tissue and cells issue, and that is one area that I believe we have some good news for our sector from Director Risch. So let's hear what he has to say about that right now.
The Commission plans to publish the revision of BTC legal proposal, so-called blood tissues and cells, SOHO regulation, is expected before summer. It is timely to adopt this framework so that it continues to assure that safety and quality requirements reflect the many technological developments and new risks in the field of transplantation and transfusion medicine and assisted reproduction. Let me assure you that this proposal does not include any changes in the clinical criteria set in ATMP framework. Let me keep in mind our common goal, which is to assure that as much patients as possible can access benefit from the safety in new therapies.
So that clearly is really good news for our sector, that there are not planning to be any changes in the definitions between BTC and ATMPs, and something, of course, that we've been lobbying on quite a bit. One of the other issues that we spend a lot of time speaking with the Commission about has been GMO. And clearly we have been asking for a derogation for gene therapies because it just provides another hurdle for developers. And it's interesting because, of course, we saw that there was a derogation temporarily afforded during the COVID pandemic and for the development of vaccines. So Anna, let's talk a little bit more about the GMO issue. It's clearly something that continues to be on our minds. We expect that with Commissioner Kyriakides' comments yesterday, that there's an acknowledgement that this is indeed an issue for the ATMP sector. We expect something to be coming out around that in the pharmaceutical legislation. From the EMA perspective, how do you look at that? And we do realize that there is certainly the EU level, and then of course there are the member state level. But give us your insight on that, if you would, please.
Yes, well, I can confirm that this is also an issue for us, obviously. Anything that is not harmonized becomes crystal clear when you have a centralized procedure, because as you know, we have these systems of committees with individuals from each country represented. So because we have this system of several pair of eyes going through every dossier, we have the rapporteur, the co-rapporteur, the peer reviews on occasions, and everybody contributes. The difference became very stark. And it's not that the different national activities, agencies have different views of that. It's that sometimes in several countries, they have a different agency with environmental responsibilities. So we have encountered delays and difficulties because of this lack of harmonization on that. There was a good attempt from the Commission in coordination with the CAT, with the Committee for Advanced Therapies, where we prepared like a common application to try to simplify. It has helped a bit, but of course the problem is still there. We were very surprised to see how fast this derogation appears with the pandemic, and we were very, very happy to see that it was already identified, the problem and the solution almost in the same packet. Now we are waiting to see what the Commission does with the more permanent solution for ATMPs. But, you know, we are talking here from one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the environmental concerns, which are very strong in the public in Europe as well. So we will have to see how that balance, how that circle can be squared.
That's a perfect segue to Susanna.
Yes, because Anna has explained it very well. The GMO legislation was put in place to protect crops and agriculture, and this is a big issue we have in the European Parliament now. But we should explore, and we should ask the Commission to explore other alternatives, or how to accelerate the process, how to simplify the process, or if it is needed a permanent exemption. But as you know, the Commission is the only one who has prerogative to push for a legislative change. So we need to ask the Commission, we should push the Commission to explore new possibilities, because as Anna said, there are a lot of discrepancies between member states. So the ball is in your court, in the Commission now, for sure, we need it.
Great.
And we will ask for that in the European Parliament.
Okay, great. And
yeah, I would take a positive view by saying that the COVID-19 has shown that there is a flexibility to adapt to regulatory process and accelerate let's say, the therapy and the authorization processes.
So we've been talking about the pharmaceutical legislation. We know that it's due at the end, the revision is due at the end of 2022, perhaps early 2023. It's supposed to be very significant. It hasn't changed in 20 years, so there's a lot riding on it. Let's set the stage for this a little bit. We'll go back to Director Risch and get his take, and then I'd like to hear what the panel has to say as well.
At the same time, Commission proposed by end of this year pharmaceutical legislation, which among the objectives of this revision is to address unmet medical needs of patients and health system. ATMPs play an important role in achieving this objective. In the revision of general pharmaceutical legislation, measures to accommodate digital emergent science and technology is to reduce also burden and provide flexibility regulatory framework will also address the EU competitiveness and attractiveness.
Susanna, there's a lot on MEP's plates right now with everything going on in the world, but clearly this is super important because it hasn't been updated for 20 years. I know that you and a number of your colleagues are very interested in this. How much emphasis are you placing on this revision, and what are your thoughts for how much it can help to change Europe's competitiveness, particularly from this ATMP sector?
I think the pharmaceutical revision will be an extraordinary opportunity for the advanced therapies sector, for sure. Because now it doesn't fit for the purpose of these advanced therapies. And Something that, so in the European Parliament, we have recognized this in our report, and of course, we should focus on this. But we can see the pharmaceutical revision as a only legislation, because it has been in coherence with many other files that are being discussed in the European institutions. I mean the European Health Data Space, which will be released at the end of this month, with the intellectual property rights. We have to make sure that we have a strong framework on intellectual property rights. The Artificial Intelligence Act, which is being negotiated now, the industrial strategy. So we can see the pharmaceutical legislation is isolated, but in coherence with many other legislation, which should make sure that Europe's competitiveness. And another important topic is also that we have to work together, because the discussion, the negotiations will start at the end of this year. And we are the European Parliament, we are co-legislators together with the Commission and with the Council, and we need to put all stakeholders around the table. So that kind of events, that kind of exchange of views is very important for us as legislators, and to talk with the industry, with the research community, with patients, with the Commission, with all the institutions. It is of most importance, and to do this at an early stage. This is also important for the Parliament, not to come up with the amendments in the end of the process, but to know what are the challenges the sector is facing now. There are a lot of challenges, we will discuss today many of them, but that type of events and that type of exchange of views for us, for politicians, they are really, really important. So we need to count with your proposals in order to negotiate the best pharmaceutical legislation for Europe to remain competitive and to reinforce also our strategic autonomy in the health sector.
I do want to follow up on one of the things that you said, which is the European Health Data Space. Like you said, we should see a proposal in the next 2 to 3 weeks. This will really bring into focus the importance of real-world evidence, real-world data. Do you think that whatever happens coming out of that we truly will be able to pull together an environment that really helps the ecosystem in terms of making it more fertile for developers to be able to be competitive here?
I think it's one of our priorities. It's of crucial importance that Europe has power on the data, controls the data, and we have data, because now we have 27 different silos. We have one of the most important healthcare systems, so the best healthcare systems in the world, and we are not able to share and to make our data interoperable. This is of big importance for us in the Parliament to have this health data, this European health data space, but we have already given some important steps. For example, the Data Governance Act the umbrella where we set the conditions for this data to be interoperable. Now we are negotiating the Data Act, which will be very, very important. So I think the future of Europe, for example, when we talk about artificial intelligence, goes through data. And if we want to attract talent to Europe, for scientists, for researchers, we can offer data, and we can offer data in a different way than US and China, and this is our advantages. So we can manage the data economy in a different way than China and US, and we can make Europe attractive for research and developers.
Anna, I would think that the real-world evidence and real-world data component would be very important to you as well, coming out of the European health data space. Give us your thoughts, please.
Yes, well, I think at the very beginning of this debate, Christian mentioned very clearly that we are dealing with high uncertainty area. So that's a fact. Every medicine that we approve has a positive benefit risk, but the amount of information that you have to reach that decision is very variable. And with ATMPs, it's certainly limited. So real-world evidence is the gold pot at the end of the rainbow, is where we really would like to do it. And as Susanna just mentioned, we have a long tradition of national health systems collecting data, universities, registries. It's fragmented and it's very difficult to compare apples with pears, but the richness of data and the tradition of collecting, storing, managing, and using data is with us. So we are in the right direction, but there is a lot to do. Now is going to be a fantastic source of helping lower the uncertainty. And I'm talking here very wide, so not just for the post-authorization collection and continue accumulating evidence of safety and efficacy of approved medicines, but also helping with the moment of the decision and with the development. So from natural history to using models to supplement, for maybe rare and also rare information is really something that is now in the eye of everybody, and it should be moving. We have the Darwin Initiative, which goes in that direction, and basically we need to cover all the aspects. So is the transparency, who contains the data, who can use it, the methodology to use it properly, the quality of the data, and the way to compare this data, the harmonization. So it's an all-encompassing problem, but the rewards are there. We cannot continue thinking of the clinical trial as super control environment for everything. A lot of that information that traditionally is coming from other corners in the future will come for real world evidence, especially for advanced therapies.
Christian, anything that you want to elaborate?
I'd just like to add that we have another call closing today, which address actually the European health data space by addressing the data needs of the regulatory agencies and HT bodies, and also trying to increase the usability of such data. And we heard that it is very important, especially the secondary data for the assessment of ATMPs. So the call is closing today.
If I may add something, because when we talk about data, and that's something that I've seen from the Artificial Intelligence Act, what we are now negotiating, the most difficult thing is to find the right balance between pushing and promoting innovation and respecting the European values and the privacy of the patients and so on. So this is something very, very complex when we work on a legislation, and it is very important that for the European health data space there is already a draft from the Commission, but that we make it simple and that we don't create much more bureaucracy, and we push for innovation. Of course, we keep our values and we respect the values and the privacy of the patients, but that we don't create so much bureaucracy and hinder innovation to flourish, because it's something that we have already seen, and we have to be very cautious in Europe with this.
Another related issue for patients is cross-border healthcare. And so that can be an obstacle in terms of patients being able to get access. We know that there is an assessment being done right now to look at whether or not that legislation needs to be reopened as well. Susanna, what role do you feel that cross-border is in kind of in the list of all the priorities that are out there as it relates to this particular sector? Where does cross-border land?
It is, for me, it's a top priority, because one of the main priorities of this pharmaceutical legislation is to put the patient in the center. And it means to reduce the inequalities we have now when we look at treatments. We have 27 Europes, and depending on where you live, you have access to the treatment, or even depending within the same member states, you have different access to treatments. So the cross-border directives should be reviewed, because the reality says it doesn't work, and even for the advanced therapies and for gene therapies, these prior authorization needed are not working, and varies from member state to member states. So for me, it's of top priority to review the directive and to make sure that we reduce inequalities in Europe, because if we want to have a solidarity health system and we want to have all Europeans to have the same rights to the same treatments, this is of most important for us and for the Parliament too.
Anna, your thoughts on cross-border?
Not many thoughts here, because this is something that is not centrally controlled at all. Inequality is something that we are all very concerned about, and especially we are talking about this ultra rare that they really need to cover the continent in a way. I heard that it's not a straightforward system, and anything that we could do centrally to facilitate, we will. But at the end of the day, it's something that is linking around the country, so I have very little to add.
In her statement yesterday, Commissioner Kyriakides stated that ATMPs are, quote, a challenging concept. An example of this includes patient access and some of the lack of innovative financing that we've talked about, reimbursement issues. How do you think that European policymakers can address the immense promise, the immense value that is delivered by those therapies that have been approved, and yet the sense that, Kristen, you were even pointing out earlier that, you know, there's a sense that it's hard to value the therapies because in some cases the clinical trials have been of shorter duration, smaller patient populations. But very clearly, ATMPs are important to the sector, as the commissioner said. How do we deal with this?
Well, I just mentioned the call that we issued on the pricing and reimbursement.
Yeah.
And so this call should able to find, let's say, innovative ways of reimbursement. This is what we hope, and this is one of the contributions to this aspect from the research point of view.
There's also the questions, of course, about access and affordability and being able to balance those. So those are big issues. Are those something that can be tackled from a competitive perspective with legislation, or is this going to have to be more innovative, getting the developers together with payers to have more conversations, perhaps having those earlier? We did hear about that yesterday in our payer panel.
That is the big debate, because the sustainability of our health systems depend on finding the right model, a new business model to be able to pay for these therapies which are needed. So that's why I think to work together, the industry with the public administration is necessary to find new models for financing this. In Spain, we have put in place several models which are working. In some places, some models have been introduced, and they work. And what we need is to harmonize, to find a common, harmonized solution for Europe. But that is the big debate. It is on the table now, and how the only thing is to work together and to be able to implement some. Because the situation now is that we have a new challenge, and new challenge cannot be answered with old mechanisms. So we need to be innovative, so innovative in payment models as the therapies are now. So we need innovation in the payment models and reimbursement for Europe. But it depends on the national systems.
I think Director Risch has some comments on this as well. Let's hear what he has to say.
To date, European medicine regulator has approved in total 19 ATMPs. However, for 6 of them, market authorization has either ended or been withdrawn, and 2 more are in the pipeline for approval. What is the reason for withdrawal of ATMPs from Europe? I'm sure you are discussing this during the meeting, but when we see this from our end, we see the reasons may differ from the case to case, but overall there turns out to be reasons that are more commercial.
Anna, I don't know if you want to comment on that. It
Yeah.
must be, yeah.
I do. This is one of the things that keeps me up at night. Europe has been good in approving and taking some decisions with a lot of uncertainty, and the numbers are terrible. I mean, Rhys just mentioned 6 out of 19, and I have to confirm none of those has been because of safety concerns or because they didn't work. It's been a commercial decision of the company at each point that for them it was not worth continue having that drug in the market. So it is, all our indications are that they are commercial decisions, which is bad for everybody because those are 6 drugs which are not available to the patients who need them at the moment. So the reasons in a way is good to know that they are commercial, but there's no good news. How we can help that, a part of what Susanna and Christian just mentioned, and we do need innovation for the reimbursement and all these areas. The part that concerns us more is this idea that we will need evidence to continue be generating after the drug has been approved and in the market. And we could use more evidence alignment before we take the decision. So what we need to do is to make sure that whatever evidence is generation, pre, during, and after, is aligned to the decision makers that came after us. So we have here the HTA bodies, the payers, the National Health Services. The regulators are asking a very not simple question, but the question is clear. Is the benefit risk of this medicine positive? If yes, approval comes. The HTAs and the payers are asking a different question, is how good is this in relation to what I already have and the price that they're asking for it? So we are not pretending here that we can align completely because we are addressing different questions. But what we need to do is that we are not asking the developers and the companies to produce any evidence that is either redundant or if you can produce a set of evidence that satisfies both decision makers, that's what we need to go for. So is this alignment on the requirements? And it's not just for developers, anything extra that you do when you are developing a drug, you are putting patients pain or exposure, and you're having physicians time and National Health Service money. So there are a lot of reasons for us to get alignment on the evidence. And the timing is a very important thing here because we cannot wait until the drug is about to be approved to start these conversations because the generation of the evidence goes on for a long time. So we are moving our conversations, our relationship with the HTA bodies especially, earlier on in the process to make sure that we are getting it right from as early as we can. That's not easy. The conversations are ongoing, and as Susanna just mentioned, the different systems are not aligned with each other as well. So for us to talk to 27 or 35 rather than with one is more difficult, but this is what we have to do. This is the system that we have. And there is a lot to do, but the conversations are definitely started.
Susanna, you want to follow up?
No. I think she's spared. Just to demonstrate the necessity to have this European health data space in order to have the real-world data that can be used on real-world evidence. Without this, we cannot have a real cost-effectiveness assessment, which could help to assess the therapies, because what we need is a holistic approach. I mean, to take into account the benefits not only for the patient but also for the healthcare system, for the caregivers, for the whole society, in order to compare treatments, traditional treatments or for chronic treatments with what the advanced therapies can offer. To have this holistic approach, we need data.
You have talked about several times, Anna has talked about, Christian has mentioned, the importance of the patient being at the center of all this. There seems that there is an opportunity for better harmonization, better synchronization amongst the many factors, Anna, you just alluded, is very difficult because there's all of these different elements that are weighing in. How much truly, from a competitive perspective, Anna, we'll start with you, do you think the patient truly is at the center of everything that's happening from a regulatory and policy and political perspective, and what can be done perhaps better?
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that, again, is not new for EMA. You have been involved with patients and having them involved in decision-making many years now. Just as an example, in the Committee for Advanced Therapies, you have the two patients and the two healthcare professional representatives as a full voting members. So they are not just advising, they are part of it. We, of course, have patients advising in a very small technical group. We check with them many times the post-authorization conditions to see they fit with the perception. So as co-decision makers have always been very important. But also you think about it, the patients are almost like the glue through the system. They are the ones with the biggest power to influence every stakeholder around the line. And the fact that they are the end users put an extra twist in that. So we do talk to them, and more we also work with the patients' organizations like Eurorders. I'm actually speaking in a Eurorders conference next week. And the communication goes both ways. There is a lot of training and education also, because we need a very well-informed group of patients. And with ATMPs, they are super in. I even understand that ARM has several patients' organizations between the members, which is, again, not that common in organization of these types. So I will say my summary line is already very much in the mix, and that influence is likely to go up rather than down.
Anything you guys want to add to that?
No, I just agree with what Anna said. Is the patient is centric to the development of any drug or any therapy, and in our projects we see very often patient organizations being represented there. You know, just during the development stage of a therapy, or even the understanding of disease. You know, many of our projects have patient representatives.
Anna, I'm going to come back to you and ask a question around the value of PRIME and EMA's role in, competitiveness and accelerated pathways. Tell us a little bit about that. I know that there's also a focus on synchronization with other regional areas, particularly with the US. But tell us about that and what that can mean to patients.
Yes, the design of this, the thought process behind PRIME was very much directed not just to speed, but to quality, to basically select those medicines that tick the boxes, which are, this is new, this could make a very big difference to patients, and this is something that we don't have any alternative or any good treatment. That could be also that you are going to move from one pill a day to one shot in your life. So this kind of dramatic effect that ATMP can bring. And we are putting these extra resources of the system in general to really help the things that we want to see in the patients. So we started with an open field for every drug. We found that ATMP at the beginning, they were not applying that much. Then we saw that they were actually getting a lot of the hits. So they moved from being 1/3 to 1/4 of the applicants to be half of the recipients. So obviously it's a scheme that really suits these therapies. We had been seeing it ticking along slowly. Of course, drug development is not fast, and particularly with ATMP, delays are very common. So we have only a few of those who are not coming to minority, I will see. But considering how many of them are in the system already with the PRIME approved, in the coming years, we will see a lot of those. So we will test the benefits of the scheme. Going to your question about how this fits with other programs, we're talking about maybe the breakthrough in the FDA. There is a big overlap, but it's not complete overlap. And sometimes it's because the developers don't apply to both. Sometimes it's because we have different criteria, and we say no and they say yes, or they say yes and we say no, so it's not initial. But basically, this idea of which are the drugs that we want to help get in there is the same. So it's bound to be a lot of overlapping. The systems that we have are very different. The FDA has more of a continuous relationship. We are more waiting until we are mature and then we move from there. And we also have many different groups looking at them. So depending on the country, which is your rapporteur, things will change. But the assessment and the committee is the same. So there is a uniformity, which is allowing us to be more informed when we are selecting the primes, because now we are more aware of which are the ones who are going to really benefit from what we're trying to do. And the direction of travel is here, not trying to go faster, trying to make sure that we arrive there with a good dossier that we can approve, and then the other stakeholders are going to be happy with. Now we are very much thinking of access to the patient, not access to the market. And that changed the game a little bit, because we are considering many other decision takers in the process.
I know something else that is intended to change the game, to use your words, is the introduction of the clinical trial regulation, which just happened at the end of January. So it's only had a couple of months for people to get used to it. Let's hear what Director Reich has to say about that.
It's true that percentage of the new ATMPs clinical trials in Europe is quite low if we compare with the other regions. Therefore, are multiple factors which explain this reality. First, ATMPs development in the EU is mostly in the hands of small biotech companies or research entities, which is difficult to reach out of investors and funds. Second, the clinical trial approval evaluation monitoring is developed to the individual EU member states. Thirdly, the clinical trials involving ATMPs with GMOs component needs to be complied with the regulatory provisions of both clinical trials and GMOs regulation. How we address those issues? On clinical trials, the clinical trials regulation finally became applicable this year, 31st of January. These regulations aim to streamline the scientific and ethical review process and should lead to more predictable outcome for the clinical trials authorization process, both in terms of timing and content.
So Anna, I'll come back to you just quickly, but we know that the intent is to promote really the clinical trials to make them easier. What's your sense of what the CTR will be able to do for Europe?
Well, I have a lot of hopes, as you can imagine, because we have been aware for a long time that there is a problem there because it's difficult for developers. And they tell us that you have to coordinate. It takes a long time to go through these different requirements. So just as a summary, the things that I'm really looking forward for the clinical trial regulation to deliver to us is that by having this single and harmonized way to apply, the time to get to the clinical trials started is going to be much faster. That's going to be an advantage for all of us. The fact that the results are going to be more harmonized is a great gate. And then this idea that we are going to have more harmonized safety control and more transparency, so everybody can see what is happening, that is a bonus. The GMO could help, will help, should help, but maybe the GMO will come later on more with the change of the legislation. But this idea of people seeing the continent as one playing field rather than make up of many difference, that's the gold standard, and that will make a big difference because the number of good hospitals and good clinical trial facilities in Europe is enormous. So it's this coordination bit that now we need to go over and to deliver.
Christian, I want to turn to you now, kind of following up on the whole concept of strategic autonomy for Europe and the development of the IPCIs, the important projects of common European interest. just to make sure that I have that right. Can you kind of share with the audience in layman's terms sort of what the intent is and where you think that may lead to from a research perspective?
Okay, it's what we call IPCEI.
Yeah.
It's okay. Important project of common European interest. The idea is to bypass the state aid rules from the Commission and to allow transnational large projects to overcome the market failure in important areas, including health. And the idea is to have at least 4 different member states proposing one project or an integrated project comprising of several, sub-projects. And so the idea is that it must be done in a transparent way. So that means that all other member states need to be aware, and so several member states can join. And the idea is also that it brings an economic, a value to the European economy in general, including the member states who do not participate to this. So this is the whole. This is let's say the broad idea. Now France has proposed to submit, or at least to prepare an IPCEI projects. Centered around health and addressing market failures in 3 different areas. One is let's say the modernization and greening of the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. The other one, the second one is the emerging health threats and antibiotic resistance, antimicrobial resistance. And the third one is on cell and gene therapy, especially cell therapy. So I know that this proposal is under preparation. Now, what about, one thing that I forgot to mention is that this is national funding, but it has also to be co-funded by the industry. And it can be also co-funded by European instruments, like it could be from Horizon Europe, or it could be from the European Investment Bank, and this is a lot. And in terms of the budget, we don't know what this consortium will propose. We have only three examples of a previous IPCEI. One was on microelectronic, another one on batteries, and the third one on the railroad networks. And just to give you an example, I think that the one on batteries was between 2 and 3 billion euro. And so this could be a substantial amount of funding, and this could probably create a kind of ecosystem for, let's say, development of ATMP. Not only development, but the whole chain of development up to commercialization of ATMP, because this is supposed to address market failures.
Well, it sounds exciting. We have about a minute and a half left, so I'd like to give everybody 30 seconds just to maybe wrap up about your views and optimism around Europe's increased competitiveness. Anna, we'll start with you.
With me.
Just your optimism around Europe's competitiveness.
Yes. Europe has a lot of good things already. For me, the wealth of the academic research base, very well funded and supported by the EC, is our biggest hope for the future. The clinical trials decisions are coming, and then we will have a very good network of national health systems to use them. So I'm optimistic that we are in a time of opportunity, but we need to be very careful how we use these chances, because just changing for changing's sake probably is not a good idea. So Our biggest task is to decide what has worked and needs to be maintained and what we can improve on rather than changing completely, because obviously a lot of very good things has already gone in Europe in this field.
Great. 10 seconds.
Yes, I am also optimistic. We have a lot of talent in Europe, the best healthcare systems. We need a more agile framework, legislative framework, in order to be more competitive. And we need more investments in research and development, like the EPCIs. We need more synergies between all the funds, all the European funds. We need to use the European recovery funds to have more resilient health systems and to invest also in research and development and in these ATMPs therapies. So the opportunities are there, but we need, and this is something that we always say, we need to invest more and we need more funds to be at the top and to be globally competitive.
We're out of time. I'm sorry, Kristen. Thank you so much. Very comprehensive, wonderful panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.